Not doing the bunker.
Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is
Going in the bunker.
Thursday night, February 23rd, only a few days away from the start of
No
championship
bunker.
week. The
Not
puppet's
going
going to be
in
in
the
the
bunker.
pocket bomber very soon. There's a poll out there on Twitter. Make sure you vote, lock him up. I'm
No.
your host, Chad Sherwood, joined up top here by David Griggs and John Titel. Down below, David Dorman and John Stalika. Our good friends Rocco Miller and Mike Cha might be joining in as well. You heard a few. Might both be running late. But this is our bracket rundown show. And what we've done this week is I've asked each of our panelists, including Mike and Rocco, to submit their a list of their top teams in the nation in order, ranked. I took all those lists, cross country scored them, and came up with a consensus list. So by doing that, we actually did the first two steps that the actual selection committee does in just a few quick votes, Griggs, correct?
Yeah, it's more long and drawn out than that. First,
Hmm.
they select teams, and then they go through an arduous process to start seeding them. What we're doing here in about 45 minutes takes them about 4 days, but they're not as good at it as we are. I mean, you got to be patient.
What we did, what I did though with that cross country scoring of all of them is I created a bracket. I'm the only one that knows the actual bracket. We're going to reveal that bracket kind of selection Sunday style here. But I thought before we get to that, why not throw another one of our one of our great blind resumes out here? Uh,
Okay.
and I got a couple teams here. I hope I remember which two teams I picked for the blind resume, but they are blind up there. I might be guessing as well. Uh, but Dorman, let me start with you this week. I got two teams up here, left and right. Before we start guessing who they are, the first question is which team do you like better, or do they both suck?
Uh, Even though the team on the right has some bad losses, one on the road and one at home, the non-conference strength of schedule is a lot better. The net is very similar. There is a road win in tier one. I'm going to go with the team on the right, Chad.
You can go with the team on the right. Okay,
Yeah.
Titel, what do you think? You agree with him with the team on right, despite two road wins in the quad one on the team on the left?
It's close because Chad does a great job with this. I think I'm going left because it looks like the tier 3 and 4 losses on the right are not good. I know the non-conference strength of schedule on the left is not good either. So I think it's a fair coin flip, but I like that the team on the left has played a ton of games against the board, which is why I'm pretty sure the team on the left is from a power conference, and I'll go with the team on the left.
Slika, I'm sure you already figured out who these two teams are. Who are they?
I know Penn State is the one on the left. I see the two wins against Illinois in there. I'm still blanking on the one on the right here.
Griggs, how about that? Penn State and who? If he
Um,
got it right.
I think he did get Penn State right. I wouldn't have gotten it right. I believe the team on the right here. Oh, I know who it is.
Go ahead.
Okay, we are looking at Utah Tech.
No, we're not looking at Utah Tech, but we are
Florida
looking
Atlantic.
at a team in that general
Yeah,
area. We're looking at
yes.
USC
See?
on the right,
There we
Penn
go.
State on the left there, and
What do you like now, Titel?
Team on the right.
I'll take Saquon Barkley and the
Yeah.
team on the left.
now there is a little recency bias on here because it kind of helped Penn State just coming off a win over Ohio State tonight that was not factored to any of our ballots. It is a quad one win, probably
Sort
for
of.
now. By tomorrow, that might be a tier two win, actually. So, it was a bit of a fake.
It's a
record at Penn
tier.
State.
It's a tier 2 win. No matter where it ends up on
Mhm.
the page, that's not a good win. And Ohio State went for that 4-point play multiple times at the end of that game.
That was an awful end to that game,
Yeah.
but these are two teams that we may see here mentioned tonight. Whether they even made the field at all is a question. This kind of shows us, Dorman, how ugly the bubble really is right now. When you look at
Yes, it
resumes like
is.
this as teams that we're discussing as potential tournament teams.
Absolutely. Are you looking for a comment there? You're dead on.
Go ahead. I was
That's
waiting to
how
see if
we
you had one.
That's how bad the bubble is. Correct.
And here is our bracket. And by the way, I did want to mention we did not, these were all going into the day today. So that Penn State win at Ohio State was not factored into the seeding. North Texas lost tonight. Might be a team that gets mentioned somewhere towards the end of the show. Not factored in here. Upcoming games that are going on right now: Michigan, Rutgers, Northwestern Illinois. Games at USC, UCLA, Gonzaga, St. Mary's off tonight. None of those factored in. But let's go ahead and start revealing our bracket here. one team at a time, and we'll start with the number one overall team. Not quite unanimous. There were a couple of us, me, you, Dorman, who did not agree with the number one team, but it is Alabama. The Tide here. Griggs, your thoughts on the Tide being number one overall?
Well, I just think that overall, when you look at the whole body of work, I know they weren't impressive last night. They needed overtime to beat a team that would have to buy tickets just to go to the CBI, I think. But that's one game out of the upper 28 that they've played, and when you look at everything they've done, I just think it's better than what anyone else has done.
Well, Dorman, do you want to respond to that, especially the poll I pulled up there, the right that you and I both voted number one?
This is the first week I flipped these two. I cannot get away from these tier one victories. They just pile up and pile up and pile up. It's just more impressive to me than what Alabama has done. I like Alabama a lot. There's no knock on them. I had them too. But if I have to pick one of these two, and they're both really good, the tier one wins keep piling up. There isn't a tier two loss, and there is one for Alabama.
Yeah, and Tytel, when you look at this Kansas profile here, I mean that's a great point. This is one of the biggest volumes of tier ones I've ever seen, and with half of them being away from home, or more than half being away from home.
Yeah.
And that's why they're the number one strength of schedule in the country. But what impresses me is that I agree with Dorman that it is a coin flip, but I think that the whole one seed line, like I can make a good argument for any of the four, I think, to be number one overall.
You're right, because the team that I voted number one overall is neither last week, 2 weeks, not this week, last week, is not either one of these teams, and they didn't lose. And yet I had them fall down 2 spots personally. But it is no surprise there that Kansas is number two overall. Probably also not a surprise, Stalika, that Houston's number three overall. Or is it a surprise to you?
No, this is about where I would have had Houston personally right here. Talent-wise, I think you could probably argue that the Cougars are going to be number one. Unfortunately, because of the way their profile is set up, it's going to be very hard for them to get above number three unless Alabama and Kansas struggle through no fault of their own.
Well, if they each suffer a loss, Kansas and Alabama, Griggs, is that enough for Houston with the win out, including the American Conference title game, to get there?
To get to the
Number-
overall
no,
one?
no overall number one.
No,
Or needing multiple losses by those teams.
based on what the committee did the other day, at least as far as I can tell, I think that it would be enough for the real committee to put them there. I really like this Houston team, and what's kind of ironic, I hate to admit this, I actually do listen to what you all say, and I thought Chad's argument for them being the overall number one last week actually had me put them at number two overall this week.
And I dropped them to number three after I made that argument. Yes.
Yeah. But I think I think the real committee, if they went out and they're the only team that does so, would do it. But perhaps I'm not the person on this show that you should be asking.
Tytel, do you think that the actual committee might have Houston overall number one, especially if Alabama and Kansas get one more slip up the rest of the way here?
I think so, but I think the X factor is the American tournaments. Like if they beat Memphis in the title game by 20, that looks great. What if they beat Wichita State by 2?
Well, but you got to remember also though, that title game is the 3:30 start on Selection Sunday. Do they even really want to be factoring that game in?
No,
I don't think they do.
They'll do.
No.
They'll have contingent. Well, they might not have one for margin of victory, but I bet they will factor it in. They'll have contingency brackets. Like, didn't they say they submitted 8 brackets one year?
Yeah, but you're right. But I think that's a good point. They may not factor in margin of victory just because of the contingency brackets already being set, and they're not going to care if they beat Wichita State by 2 or by 300. They're going to use the Houston beats Wichita State bracket.
Right. Yeah.
Number 4 overall, I don't think it's any surprise either, is Purdue here, Dorman. They are, I think everyone had them, other than Griggs, everyone had them at number 4 here. Everyone did.
I think it's just a recency bias. We've seen them lose a couple. Maryland, Northwestern come to the front of mind. They get Indiana this weekend on Saturday night. exactly where I have them. I just think it's a few losses recently, but I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think they're still safely on the one line. Although, if some of these Big 12 teams start to make a final push in their conference, win out, and then go to the finals, Purdue might be slipped to the two line. But I see Purdue right now on the one line, and barring a major fall in the Big Ten tournament, I think they'll be on the one line.
Number 5 overall team covering the West region there. By the way the brackets would work here is the South region champion would play the East region champion in the Final Four. Midwest would play the West. But number 5 overall, Titel, and this was almost unanimous across the board as well, is the Texas Longhorns. Setting up a potential Houston, Texas regional final if it got that far.
Yippee-ki-yay for the Lone Star State. No, the Longhorns are playing great. They have a ton of Tier 1 wins in one of the best conference in the country. My question, I don't know the last time we had a national coach of the year who didn't start the season as the coach at that school, but I think I might give my vote to Rodney Terry. He's done amazing, period.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, and he really has. I think we have the number 6 overall team here. And Griggs, I specifically want to address it to you because all of us had this team voted 5, 6, 7, more or less, except for you who had the number 11 overall. So what is the hate you have for Arizona?
Is 11 not good? I mean, 11 is better than 352 of the teams out there. I thought, well, pull them up because I want the visual. For starters, they don't top out as high. I mean, they have like the wins against Tennessee and UCLA. I still think I didn't have UCLA behind them, but they came at home. And the one thing about me, I don't think they top out quite as high. And the 2 losses to Stanford and Wazoo, there's just nobody else we're looking at with not 1 but 2 losses to teams that are nowhere near the NIT on the top 2 lines.
Dorman, you're in Arizona. You want to respond to that?
I have Arizona ahead of UCLA, but ironically, I do have Texas, Baylor, and a third Big 12, K-State, ahead of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of with Griggs. Piling up, Big 12 is just piling up these tier 1 wins, while Arizona, no fault of their own, is beating up on an awful Pac-12 conference.
Okay, but Titel, how do we justify having the 2 of them, or especially Griggs, having UCLA above Arizona when head-to-head they've played once and Arizona won?
Well, they did win once, but it was at Arizona.
Thank you, Titel.
I thought my mistake. All right.
No, the head-to-head is in the Wildcats' favor. The good news is that they've been neck and neck all season, but you don't have to worry about it in February because they play in March 4th in LA, and they play hopefully again in the Pac-12 title game a week later. So the head-to-head is important, but I'm telling you, I don't know that it matters right now because they might play twice in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Good point here.
Go back to the profiles, Chad. The 2 of them, and again, like we're going to see UCLA here in a second. I just think that when you look at the losses, you're not going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 losses to non-tournament teams by anybody else that's a protected seed, much less this high up.
Okay,
Just,
let's keep things rolling along here. And Salika, actually coming up number 7 before we get to UCLA even is Baylor, a team that has slipped up twice lately, but still has a very impressive profile. Yes,
and I think this was a team that you could argue be arguably up as high as number 6 nationally right here. They're obviously going to be a step behind Kansas and Texas as far as the Big 12 right here. They've also been more consistent as opposed to teams like Arizona where they don't have as many bad losses. But then again, it's impossible to have losses in the Big 12 this year.
and you got to remember here, Baylor and UCLA did play non-conference. Baylor won the game. And that for me was actually the deciding factor why I did have Baylor very, very slightly ahead of our number 8 team, who is UCLA. Don't think it's a surprise that they finished off our.
Not unless you're Mick Cronin and you think it's ridiculous.
Well, yeah. But let's go on to our 3 line here, though. Titel, let me start things off with our number 9 overall team out there in the East region. Yet another Big 12 team here. This is already our 4th one here in 9 teams, Kansas State.
I think this is the first team that has swept another team on this screen as they beat Baylor twice so far this year, which is pretty impressive because everybody likes Baylor. Yes, thank you for the confirmation. The non-conference strength of schedule is atrocious. I'll give you that. As Stalika knows, losing to Butler is atrocious this year, but no, this is a quality team, and I think this is right where they belong.
Right, and coming in right after them, Dorman. How about our Big East leader, Marquette, who's been flying up the seed list and is now scratching at that 2 line even?
Exactly where I had them. I agree. They are scratching at the 2 line. They're playing great basketball at the right time, and they can score. And when you can score, you can advance in this tournament, because I like teams that I love Virginia. But when you slow the game down, there's only so many possessions. If you're the better team, you want more possessions. I love the way Marquette executes on offense. They pressure the ball on defense. I think Marquette is a strong 3 and moving towards the 2.
Griggs, number 11 team overall. This team, there were votes all over the place. Neither Dorman or I liked them very much at all here, but the rest of you all seem to like them on the 3 line. And that's a kind of the opposite of red hot Tennessee team.
Yeah, and I realized this was cross-country voting, and we were voting them all over the place. And when it goes to the committee discussion, who knows where they land? The discussion is going to be all over the place. I think the reason for that, Chad, and stay with me here, is that their profile is all over the place. And they've looked fantastic. They've got a win against Kansas and looked really good in that game, but they've also had some games to where you're really holding your nose. And, 1 or 2, it's a fluke. But when you're losing as stupidly as they did to Vanderbilt, to a team that they're clearly should be better than, and to Colorado, it's just, yeah, of course they're all over the place.
Well, and Stalika, one of the things I think why Tennessee may have ended up here is because if you look at the next batch of teams that we're going to get into here, they've all bunch of teams that have been losing recently, other than maybe our number 12 team, who's the team that kind of ended up coming up here. How about the Zags getting back up to the 3 line?
Well, this is a team that outside of St. Mary's and LMU have been pretty consistent as far as WCC play goes. Now their win against Kentucky back in November is finally starting to look as good as it should be at the beginning of the year.
Right, and the wins over Alabama, Xavier, Michigan State, still a lot of good at the top of this profile. They get this win over, well, they beat San Diego tonight, and they get the win over St. Mary's this weekend. It's going to make that I think that's going to solidify them probably right here on the 3 line, probably all the way through. They would only have 2 games in the West Coast Conference tournament to play after this.
Right, and I think LMU made a tactical error in beating Gonzaga. Wow, did it make them mad?
Titel, going on to our 4 line here, number 13 overall is UConn, a team that had fallen out of the top 16 for a while. Now here they are as their second best Big East team.
Always helps when you beat Providence on TV, right time, right place. I think that Coach Hurley's got them going in a good direction. Bit of a home court hero, but have been good neutral site and 500 on the road. So certainly understandable, and I can excuse it. St. John's loss stands out. Certainly no shame in losing by 3 to Xavier, and a lot of Tier 1A good wins.
Yeah. And Dorman, if we look below this, our next team up after UConn, a team that had been towing the 2 line up until they completely wet the bed here, and I don't know what happened at Boston College with
they did more than just wet the bed.
They laid an egg, and they're going the wrong way at the wrong time.
And I'll confess, I had them 17 overall. I didn't even have it in the Sweet 16. I probably a little too much recency bias by me, but go ahead.
Have you not seen what my team has been doing of late?
we haven't seen them show up on the board yet either, have we, Stalika? Go ahead, Dorman.
I also think the ceiling of Virginia moving up is very limited too, because there you see they're at Carolina, Clemson, Louisville. Not really going to get much credit for, and maybe a tiny bump up for a win at Carolina, but not in the field and of mine. Either is Clemson or Louisville. I just think the upside with Virginia, even a win or 2, anything besides an ACC conference championship title in the tournament, I don't see the team moving up. So I think this line is the max for them.
Real quick about the Who's, and I know that the selection and seeding process is a profile heavy process. A little over a week ago, I think we all looked at their remaining schedule and expected them to kind of, just walk to winning out the regular season. And well, they've been asleep. They barely beat Louisville. They barely beat Notre Dame. These are not just, average teams. Those are bad teams. And then they lost pretty handily to Boston College. What is wrong with the Hoos? Because it doesn't matter where they're seated. They're not getting past the round of 64 if they don't play better than what they've played the last three games.
And the lower you fall, the tougher your first round opponent's going to be. I'd rather be playing a 14 seed than a 13 seed, and even that than a 12 seed. Let's get to these last
14
couple.
seeds are better than the three teams that they've just played. So,
Salika, Iowa State. Here's another Big 12 team coming in here on the back end on the 4 line. 5th Big 12 team.
Iowa State seems to be another team that's actually getting closer to the 500 mark in conference play here in the Big 12. I mean, you're only about 8-7 right here. Their only real win away from home of note is going to be at TCU. I mean, I think their best win outside of conference was North Carolina on the neutral floor back in the Phil Knight tournament.
Yeah, if they want to remain in the Sweet 16 here as a protected seed, they better win these next 2 at home against Oklahoma and West Virginia.
Yeah.
If they lose either one of those, I could see them falling out of this top 16 here. But Griggs, the last of our top 16 teams, is it Stalika's Xavier Musketeers?
No.
Not according to my ballot.
Nope.
No.
How about Indiana?
I really like this Indiana team. I had them on this line, but I actually had them a little higher. They're good. I don't know what else to say. They, they won at Xavier, not just against Xavier, but at Xavier. They have some other really good road wins. And, nothing on here really has you holding their nose. Like at Illinois, that's a good win. Purdue, even though it's at home and doesn't count, good win.
Well, huge game this weekend at Purdue. They win that one, and they probably move up another seed line here. Quite honestly,
they probably move all the way up an entire line. They get that one.
That is our top 16. And before we move on here, Titel, any thoughts on this? Anybody that you think is missing here from the top 16?
I do, although it's my fault because I didn't have them higher than this, but the Hurricanes are looking
Yes.
amazing. Since losing
Yes.
to Maryland on November 20th, they have gone 19-4. The 4 losses are all on the road and all by 6 points or less. Granted, one of them is at Georgia Tech, which is somewhat inexcusable, but I would not want to be playing Miami anytime soon because they look like they are rolling.
I'll tell you, Miami was the next team up. They were number 17 overall for us. But,
Okay, good.
But let me throw out another team that I personally thought should be the top 16 that none of us had here. And yes, I'm talking Northwestern, Griggs.
Hang on. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a little higher than what I had them. But if they were to have landed there, I wouldn't have argued that I like this team.
And they have an early lead at Illinois as we record this right now. You throw that road win in there. I think there was a protected seat argument for the Northwestern Wildcats. And God, I never thought I'd ever say that in my entire life.
Double check my ballot, Chad. I had this team number 16.
Yep, you did. You had them number 16. I had them number 13. Yeah, let's go ahead though and reveal the 5 line here. Dorman, we mentioned Miami and Northwestern. Also, Stalika Xavier team and St. Mary's to finish out this line here.
Very similar. Sorry,
Dorman. Yeah,
No,
Dorman
go ahead,
first.
Dorman.
Yeah.
I have this very similar. My only flip flops are the Miami to the Tennessee. I had Miami on the 3 line, and I have Tennessee right here on the 5 line. Besides that, it looks really similar. I have Northwestern exactly in this spot. Northwestern, Xavier, and Indiana. I had a hard time for the last 16 through 18, essentially. I thought it was really close between Xavier, Northwestern, and Indiana.
Titel, what about St. Mary's? And let's assume they win the game tonight and they lose at Gonzaga. Then they maybe lose to the Zags again in the West Coast Conference. Can they stay here on the 5 line? Because you're losing to a team that's better than you, but you're losing twice.
That'll be tough only because even if they're deserving of it, I think other teams will pass them by getting tier 1 wins in power conferences. Much like Griggs's argument that Arizona shouldn't be as high because they have a couple of losses to teams not in the tournament, Exhibit B right here.
Mm-hmm. let's go ahead and Griggs and pull up the sixth line here. Potential opponents for the 3 seeds in the second round. We've got Illinois, who we just mentioned, is playing Northwestern right now. TCU, San Diego State, and Creighton coming here on the sixth line.
Yeah. I'm not as big on San Diego State. I just think their profile is a little bit bland, and while I like them, I don't think I had them quite this high. Good, definitely in the top half of the bracket.
You had them much lower than anybody else, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Which means everybody else must have had them substantially high because they landed on the 6 line. And it canceled mine out. I just don't. The win at Utah State, while Utah State isn't a tournament team, that's really good. I think the win at UNLV is good. I'm not as mesmerized by Utah State at home, Boise at home. I just think that while this is probably 8-9 range, not quite top 25-ish, which is when you're talking 6 line or higher, what you're talking about.
Right. Well, let me ask you, Titel, TCU came in on this line as well, and this team had been up there in the top 16 for a while. Now, Miles is back, and his teams look pretty good since his return, although they did lose their last game out. Is this where this team is now, around a 6 line?
I think this is one of those, the committee says they factor in injuries, and I think Miles one is one of the ones you have to factor in. I don't know if it's the most important one in the nation, but it's certainly up there. He missed 5 games. They lost 4 of them, but the 4 teams were Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Baylor, and Iowa State, who are all solidly, I don't know, solidly in the field, but I think they solidly have a good chance. And when he's healthy, they beat Kansas, they beat Baylor, they beat Kansas State. So he is a difference maker when he's healthy or when he's not.
I'll tell you what, we got joining us right now, if he can hear us, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org at the USF Dons Arena there, getting ready to see them take on the Portland Pilots tonight. Rocco, how you doing?
Hello. Hello, yes. Unfortunately, neither of these teams will be in the at-large field this evening, but still love them both, and it's senior night here in San Francisco, and great to be on the show. Thanks for having me, Chad.
Well, we don't know that. We're only through the top 6 lines. That we have not selected any of them yet, but we got a ways to go.
There's still hope, baby. There's still hope.
Well, Rocco, as you take a look at what we've done so far, I'm going to reveal the 7 seeds right now. Maybe get your thoughts on these 4 teams that are coming up. We've got on the 7 line Providence, my Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who are in a battle with Michigan right now, Texas A&M and UCLA, and a potential Texas A&M second round game in there.
Yeah, I think Providence and A&M are probably in the right spot. I question a little bit Rutgers and Missouri, but this is the part of the bracket where I think from maybe like the last 6 seed until the top 11 seed, there's a lot of mush. And, you see a lot of varying opinions starting right about now. For me, Rutgers and Missouri are a little bit lower, but certainly have an argument with their big wins, especially road wins. I think we did see the committee reveal that they love the high-end road wins on the other team court, not neutral site. So that's really good for Rutgers, perhaps. Missouri's just metrics are all over the place. Predictably, if most of the committees lately, they've been seeding more, I guess, if you want to lead one side or the other on the predictive side. Missouri is like averaging in the high 60s, thanks to that BPI at 71. So again, I think seed-wise, Missouri is trending more towards a 9. Guessing the committee here, I know not all of you are, but otherwise I have no real issue.
Dorman, Texas A&M, this was a team that was barely in the field just a couple weeks ago, but kind of red hot here, 6 wins in a row now.
I'm glad you asked me about them. This is too high, in my opinion, for Texas A&M. I know they're red hot. The unbalanced schedule in the SEC. They got some nice road wins. I do agree with that. The Auburn, the Missouri, the Florida road wins looks good. But I have teams like Iowa and even Duke ahead of this Texas A&M team. I just think
really.
Yeah, I like Iowa's resume more than I like A&M's.
Well, let's actually. Griggs, let me go to you here, pull up the 8 line, because Iowa and Duke, 2 teams you mentioned, are right here on the 8 line, just missing that, along with a couple other blue bloods, Michigan State and Kentucky.
Yeah. How unfortunate that Michigan State, Kansas in the round of 32. I really Michigan State is kind of laying in the weeds, and we've seen years where maybe not an 8 seed, but we've seen them go deep into the tournament as sort of someone that certainly in years where they certainly didn't get a protected seed, but there's their profile and there's a lot of tier 1 there. And while the loss at Notre Dame was, utterly absurd, nothing else is really that bad. And they've been competitive in a lot of those games. The loss at home to Purdue was really close, and the Gonzaga game was really close. And I just think that, 8, I could see them even being as high as a 7 right now. I think that's about where I had them.
Right. And Titel, what about Kentucky here? Have they turned things around to be kind of, wearing white now, a top 8 seed?
Certainly love the sweep of Tennessee, even if Tennessee's heading in the wrong direction. Strength of schedule is solid, against the board solid, and the conference solid. Yes, there's Calipari's putting it together, which is ironic because this seems like the recipe that were his old teams, where he brought in a bunch of freshman McDonald's All-American kids who were like inconsistent in November but playing well by the end of February. This year he's got Sheboy and he's got grad transfers, and like they're getting better as the season goes on.
Well, there we go. We're going to go to the 9 line now, and we're going to get potential first round matchups. And as I reveal the 9 line here, I'm going to show you that, when the committee puts together these matchups here, especially when they do the bracketing, things just happen, and sometimes they happen that are crazy good, sometimes crazy bad. Bring your attention to the South region, the first round game in Louisville, Duke versus the 9 seed, Maryland Terrapins.
Wow.
They have not played in about 10 or 11 years now. Duke swore they would never play Maryland again. So, Griggs, are they going to forfeit the game?
I guess so. I don't know. Like, there's a long list. I mean, that's 100 items long or more of games that should be played and aren't. This one is, if it's not at the very top, it's very close to the top. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. I'm not big on Maryland. I think they're atrocious on the away from home.
But to get Duke Maryland in the first round, you would
get
agree
Duke Maryland in the first round, I very much like them on this line.
Yeah, there they are, and yeah, Maryland does have a huge hole here. Let's talk about that for a second here, Rocco. Maryland, huge hole. Where are the road wins? You got to go down to Minnesota to find them.
Yeah, from that standpoint, I'm not a big Maryland proponent. The road record's not good. But I do think, we're looking at a committee of 12 people. They are going to be blown away by the metrics, averaging out in the 17 to 18 range, 17.7 as you have there. And, the resume metrics, even though none of us really appreciate the true road wins, they did beat Miami in Uncasville, Connecticut. And that means a lot. They beat them by 18. Miami's a team threatening to be a protected seed right now. So, again, we didn't really see a lot of evidence of the committee caring about neutral wins as much as we thought they would last week. But I do think Maryland's probably a 7 or an 8. I think 9's on the low end of the stick for the tournament.
Okay. Salika, we got 3 other teams in this line here: Arkansas, Pittsburgh, and NC State. Your thoughts on those 3?
I think NC State and Pittsburgh are teams you could also make an argument that could be higher, at least as far as their teams on the court. As far as their resume goes, they're probably going to be flirting with a 9, maybe a 10 line right here. Arkansas, I mean, they were a team that was getting close to the wrong side of the bubble. They've started to stabilize a bit when you compare it to what's going to be coming ahead.
Yeah, well, look about what is coming ahead here, Titel. Let's go ahead and reveal the 10 lines. These are some more first-round opponents, including my Scarlet Knights potential first-round opponent. Providence gets Auburn. My Scarlet Knights get Florida Atlantic. A&M gets Nevada. Missouri gets Memphis. Your thoughts on those
Memphis all the way up on
here?
the 10. Wow. All right.
This is neat in terms of it's a lot of power conference against non-power conference teams. I think Rutgers will handle FAU, but to be honest, I hope you scout them well, because I assume you have not scouted a team from CUSA in quite a while. As far as Providence Auburn, a nice matchup of bigs in terms of Bryce Hopkins versus Janai Broom. And Nevada, I like Nevada A&M in terms of 2 teams who are getting hot at the right time, and Alfred versus Uncle Buzz seems like a nice one there.
Yeah, let me see here. Dorman, do you agree that these are the right 4 teams here for the 10 line?
I do. I have Memphis on the 10 line, and I thought I was going to have to explain myself, but I agree.
Okay.
That's exactly where they should be. And I think they're kind of getting themselves off the bubble and on the right side of the bracket.
It's
Agreed
one of the
to a
things
nice
that-
win tonight. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and yeah, we
Had to
didn't
have
even
that.
factor in they did. It's not even on the screen yet, but
Correct.
they did win at Wichita State tonight. But Griggs, one of the things that happens with a team like in the American this time of year, they can start piling up wins while these bubble teams for the power conferences are playing such quality opponents that they're piling up losses.
Yeah, and I think that like it seems to me every year, at least the way I remember it, when the bubble seems really murky going into championship week, and by Friday and Saturday it looks a little more clear to where there just aren't that many discrepancies. There's always going to be some, but you're right. Like I think Memphis can continue to have winnable games away from home at the conference tournament. And when you get down to the end, they already have 8 wins away from home. They have the opportunity to get 4 or 5 more than that before they're done.
Yeah, so that Memphis team in here, along with Nevada and Auburn, I'm going to go to the 11 line now. I'm only going to reveal the 2 of the teams. These are the last 2 teams to avoid the first 4 trip to Dayton, and that would be Oklahoma State and
Oh, the
Boise State.
Pokes. Yeah.
Rocco, I don't know if we have you back or not, but
I'm
your
here.
thoughts on, sounds much better. Yes.
Yeah,
You lost
I got
you
I got
lost
to
your
the
crowd though.
behind the scenes, behind the music there.
Oh, you're at another game now. Okay, Rocco.
Yes.
Yeah, coming
Yes.
to us from Boulder, Colorado.
All right, Rocco, how's things for
USC Colorado game.
Rocco, how about this here? We just got Oklahoma State and Boise State in avoiding the first 4.
This feels right. I
Okay.
think these are the last 2 I had before we get to the first 4. Not sure how it worked out that way, but I'm all for it.
All right. Griggs, you were not as high in Boise State. I don't think you even had them in your field.
Yeah, they may have missed it. I just there's just part of it is the profile is decent. It's just when I measured it up against the rest of the bubble, I like the other ones better. And there's just something about Boise State when watching them play. I just haven't been overly impressed with the last several games. Now, the Pokes were a team I was super impressed with, except for their last 2 games. I mean, they took unimpressive to an entirely new level.
Well, and
The
now
last couple here.
let me ask about this team here, Titel. Oklahoma State now 3 losses in a row, sitting at 16 and 12 overall. And you only got K-State, Baylor, and at Texas Tech left of the regular season, plus the Big 12 tournament. How do they get in? How do they win more games? I don't know.
So that's the key. They get in by winning games, but as you said, it's going to be an uphill battle. That is a pretty darn tough little schedule there, which is already 7th in the nation before those 3. I don't know if they can win any of them, and I don't even know which is the easiest in terms of the 2 at home or the 1 at the road on the road. They're all hard.
Yeah. So that's good. This is going to be a team worth a lot of watching here the last 2 weeks here. This Oklahoma State team.
Yeah.
In right now, but we will see. Let's go ahead. Stalika, I'm going to reveal the first of our first 4 matchups. It's over in the East region. Creighton's potential first round opponent, the winner of a Mississippi State-Wisconsin game.
Whoa.
How about the Badgers slipping back into the field?
It certainly helped the Badgers that they got a decisive win at home against Iowa. When you compare it to teams like West Virginia, Texas Tech, Utah State. I know Wisconsin doesn't have the sexiest profile right here. I would still take that over the teams I just mentioned for the time being.
Yeah, and Wisconsin got in really on the strength of Griggs. Your very high vote on them. You want to explain that? Because there were almost 20 spots between where you had Wisconsin ranked and where Dorman did.
What it boils down to, it's a good question because I have not liked what I've seen. I mean, it is eye-gougingly bad. Some of the stretch they've, as poorly as they played in some of the stretches that they've been on. But at Marquette, a win over a protected seed, at Iowa, a win over a team that's, if not in the top half of the bracket, close to it. And nobody else on the bubble has that. And even the win at Penn State is pretty good. And when you look at their losses, maybe minus the Nebraska loss, none of them smell. There's a lot of them, and it's just, a lot of change can add up to dollars. But there isn't anything that sinks them so far down to where they're all the way outside the bracket. And I guess I was just like, I guess what did it for me was when I kept looking at them side by side with one after another, I'm like, well, that's better. Well, whiskey's better. Well, whiskey's better.
Okay.
And they just landed kind of high on my seed list, I guess.
Okay, well let's go ahead here. And actually, there was it's some bracketing issues. Wisconsin would have actually been our second to last team in, not our third to last team in. There had to be for bracket issues had to be a flip inside the first four. Our second to last team in, which should have been playing Mississippi State, but for that, would have been, in fact, West Virginia, who would go to against our last team in USC. Rocco, you're out there on the West Coast. USC
Yeah.
squeezing into the field here and having to play the Mountaineers.
No,
Yeah,
Rocco
correct.
at the Colorado USC game right now.
It's funny, actually. It's almost exactly the 3-year. I think it is the 3-year anniversary of the Colorado USC game I did in Boulder in 2020, which was the last road trip before shutdown for my experience that year. So it is kind of a weird situation that they're playing on the same day this year. But I'll digress. The USC Trojan profile, of course, is highlighted by a UCLA home win by 14 points, an Auburn home win. And, when you compare their overall Q2 and Q3 record to the rest of the options, they're much stronger against a better strength of schedule. But the true road wins, assuming that Arizona State doesn't find a way back into the picture, and obviously University of Washington's not going to get back there. Those are their only 2 true road wins against the top 2 quads. They're 5-7 overall in an away neutral setting. So again, not exactly successful. And then you have 2 out of bounds losses, I would say. A home loss to Florida Gulf Coast, who hasn't even qualified yet for the Atlantic Sun tournament, and a road loss to Oregon State team that's been at the bottom ever since their Elite 8 run. And so there's a lot of skepticism about USC. I think the best thing for USC today is that there aren't any better options, and I think they're the clear choice, but that could quickly change on any given day.
And they have a chance to really remedy that road win thing here, but with 2 winnable road games against quality opponents this week. Got Colorado at Utah.
They do, but that's honestly the toughest travel in the league with the mountains and, just all the elements that brings. And Colorado and Utah themselves are not slouches. They just haven't done enough to be in the conversation today.
Right. But I'm just, if they can get this sweep here, I think it puts them solidly in.
That was really
even though they're not beating tournament teams.
Correct. Yeah.
I would
really
agree with that.
impress me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Tytel, let me ask you the same question about West Virginia they asked you about Oklahoma State, because again, how do they get in at 16-12 with those 3 games left on the schedule?
18 games against the board with 3 more ahead. I mean, there's few teams in the nation, I think, that have 20 games against the board, because welcome to the Big 12. Their good's good. They don't have a ton of bad. I don't know about that Oklahoma loss. That Texas Tech game could end up as a tier 1. That's why they have his number 6 strength of schedule. It's weird. When you have the greatest league in the nation and arguably one of the greatest leagues ever in the history of the sport. Yes, I think that's a valid argument.
I think it is too.
What do you do with the teams who finish at the bottom of that league?
Well, right now we just put 8 of them in, and I'm going to go ahead, Dorman, and reveal our top 4 teams out. And guess what? A 9th team was our top team out that just missed the field, very close to baiting out USC for the final spot, was Texas Tech, along with New Mexico, North Texas before the loss tonight, and Penn State before the win tonight at Ohio State. That kind of upped their profile a little bit.
I had all 4 out, but New Mexico's opportunity, they blew that last night. They had a big halftime lead in Boise, and it evaporated quickly. That was their chance to really show something. Texas Tech it's an interesting case, because like was just said about West Virginia, they have a lot of losses, but how many teams at this point with on the bubble have these quad 1 wins against Texas and Iowa State and protected seeds? No one. So although I didn't have Texas Tech in, I can see them, getting in to a final to the first 4 and a trip to Dayton.
Yeah. Let me throw one other team here. College of Charleston. The way we did the seeding, the first team, the highest rated team from any conference that got votes was deemed their automatic bid winner. So I did deem College of Charleston the automatic bid winner. So they're going to be on the next line, the 12 line. That being said, they would have been, if they needed an at-large bid, right in here in our top 4 teams out as well. Stalika, is Charleston that close now? And do they have a shot if they win win their regular season finale. They already won their game tonight, and get all the way to the Colonial final and lose there to Hofstra.
They were playing with fire tonight. They were down 10 points in the second half against Towson and had an 18-4 run just to rescue themselves. So with a win, if they were to win out, I think they could potentially finish above the cut line. But you take another loss even against Hofstra, I'm not sure they get above that line at that
Well,
point.
they don't need. Well, if they don't take another loss at all, you don't need it at
Yeah, they don't
bid.
need
So,
it.
so
But
Well,
this
my
is a
point
good.
is, if they beat Hofstra along the way in the Colonial Championship, their profile at that point will be good enough to be above the first four.
right. Okay.
Yeah, this is a good question for both Titel and Rocco, I think. We're not necessarily trying to guess the committee. You all are both really good at it. I don't think the committee takes this team without the auto bid. And I could see the media like blowing a gasket if that happens. But what do you all think? Is this enough to get in? It's not a strong case, in my
Go ahead,
opinion.
Rocco.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, David. I think, you're looking at a team that's played 17 hard games and they've gotten 5-12 in those 17 games. It'd be one thing if they had a road win against one of those top six. They get more chances at that than any team in any other league, and they don't have any of them.
This is Charleston.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Well, good points on Texas Tech, though.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Charleston a little bit different, obviously. They've won almost all the games they've played in. They've only got the 3 losses. It's unfortunate for them that the teams they took down in the Charleston Classic did not have better seasons, because at the time when they beat them, we were all pretty impressed. For a team from the Colonial Athletic Association to win a major ESPN event is a massive deal, no matter if it's on their home court or not. But I'll digress. That's just their story. I think they're just there as a really decent option fallback if not enough bids are stolen, or if none of these teams like Michigan or Arizona State capitalize on unbelievable opportunities here at the end. They're a decent option. I think the committee as a whole might come to an agreement. You see that SOR number at 44. I think if they can get that into the 30s, I think everybody gets a little bit less of a stomach ache. And a lot of that's out of their control. That's just teams dropping above them.
Right. Couple quick notes here as we record this. We just mentioned the USC. They're actually up by more than 10 points at halftime in their game as we record this. And my Northwestern argument is why they should be a top 4 seed.
Looks
being
good.
strengthened as they are blowing Illinois out of their building as we record this.
And it's on the road, so it counts.
The other teams that did receive votes did not get, at least to be in the top 55 teams, not necessarily in the field, but as being close to the field, include North Carolina, Utah State, Clemson, Seton Hall, Michigan, Arizona State, Vatech, Oregon, and Wake Forest. Dorman, I look at this list and they all disgust me, honestly.
Wow, that was
when their name is
strong
not,
feelings here.
when their name is not called on Selection Sunday, they really have no gripes. They've done this to themselves. They had opportunity after opportunity, and they really blew it. So I feel worse for teams like we just discussed, Charleston, Oral Roberts, North Texas, if they don't get in, because these big power conference teams had the opportunities and they came up short time and time again. But North Texas, Charleston, Oral Roberts don't have those opportunities. They've gone out there and win almost all their games. I would feel bad if they do come up short.
Titel, is there anybody on this list of these teams that you think we should have put in?
Other than Arizona State, Titel.
Arizona
no,
State, he doesn't want on the also considered list. Even, but go ahead.
No, I think there's nobody who stands out. Just quickly, one note about Charleston. I think the most wins ever for a team to miss the tournament is 28. Charleston now, I believe, is 27. They're going to beat Stony Brook in their next game to finish with 28. I don't think they're going to lose in their first conference tourney game. So I think this team is not locked, but they're going to get in.
Yeah,
Okay.
they could be sitting there if they lose to Hofstra. That championship game is their next loss. 30 wins. Although
How
one
many
not
are they all
tw
D1 now?
29 D1 wins.
Okay, that would be. I believe it is 28, and I think it was Murray State from I forget the
Yeah,
year, but
yeah.
yeah,
I'm going to quickly
And
reveal
St.
the.
Mary's. St. Mary's won
St.
28.
Mary's won 28 1 year and got yeah.
Let's go ahead and reveal the rest of the field here a little bit quicker. But the 12 seats, first of all, I mentioned that College of Charleston team. Salika, they get your Xavier team there in the first round.
Yeah, and a
Oral
Xavier
Roberts,
alum and Pat
Oh,
Kelsey
that's
also
a
going
fun
up
one, yeah.
against the Musketeers.
Oral
But yeah,
Roberts
you look at Oral
against my.
Roberts as a possible upset special right here. Drake, possible upset special. VCU, not so much.
Yeah, or Robert Drake. VCU's been playing really good
VCU's been
basketball
playing good,
recently,
yeah.
but that would be
Yeah.
an awful matchup against a red-hot Northwestern team.
Yeah.
13 seeds here. Virginia with an in-state rivalry against Liberty, potentially. Iowa State gets Southern Miss. Indiana gets Utah Valley, and UConn gets the new leaders in the MAC, Toledo. Rocco, you
Toledo
were just
playing
you were
well.
just there watching as Toledo took the lead in the MAC, were you not?
I was there. Yeah, I just got back and awesome experience. They played amazing. They blew out Akron basically from the jump. And I actually talked to the staff about the types of teams they would want to be matched up with in the 4 and 5 if they can win the MAC. UConn was on the list of teams probably they don't want to see because
Sorry,
the two big men just so overwhelming when UConn like peak UConn is really hard. But I mean, if Toledo gets in, like I will say for the Rockets' sake, their offense, second best offense in the country in terms of points per game. They've been at this level for a long time. They just keep getting clipped in the MAC tournament. If they get in, they've got Sweet 16 potential, no doubt, whether they're a 13 or a 12.
14 line, we've got Marquette going up against Yale, Tennessee going up against Iona, Gonzaga, a little local
Eastern
rivalry going up against Eastern
Washington, yeah.
Washington, and K-State against UC Irvine. Jumped out of the 15 line, Baylor gets UNC Asheville, Arizona gets
The
Vermont.
Penguins.
Penguins are in there against UCLA, and Colgate in there also against Texas. And finally, the 16 line, Alabama would get Alcorn State, Kansas would get Samford, Houston would get the winner of a Texas A&M Corpus Christi Howard game, and Purdue would get the winner of a Morehead State Fairleigh Dickinson game. There is our field, and with that all revealed here, I want to run through each of you for any other thoughts you may have on the exercise we did, on the bracket that we just revealed, or anything else about college basketball at all. So any other thoughts here? Dorman, let me start with you tonight.
Yeah, the 1 and 2 seeds in this tournament, so-called the top 8 or 9, the top 8 teams in the country, they will play in the second round, the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeds. Those teams, as we look at this board, teams like Duke, Michigan State, Kentucky, Memphis, it's the second round is going to be incredible, even for these top seeds. There will not be an easy game in the second round because of how much I think parity we do have this year in college basketball. Those teams have played against the power conferences all year long. I'm talking about the 7 through 10 seeds. They will not be intimidated by Kansas, Baylor, Alabama, Texas, Purdue. The second round is going to be incredible basketball this tournament.
That's a fair point. When you look at some of these names we're seeing there on the 7, 8, 9, 10 in lines. Stalika.
I think Dorman had mentioned earlier that a 7 seed seemed a little high for Texas A&M. I think that's possible. They could get up to the 6 line or maybe even the 5 line if they're able to run the table the rest of the way. We don't have the same system in the SEC like they do in the WAC where you could really get a measure of the schedules because it is unbalanced. Granted, they only play Alabama and Tennessee once. They do have sweeps against Missouri and Auburn, so the Aggies can hang their hats on that despite a pretty slow start back in November.
Yeah, I don't think Uncle Buzz is going to be complaining this year about missing the tournament. Rocco.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just point the attention back down to the combination of top teams out and also considered, and I'll say I'm very zeroed in these next 10 days on let's just call it 4 teams. I'll start with Arizona State, who just regardless of where they're at today, have unbelievable opportunity. They could play at their rival Arizona in a road game, one of the toughest places to win. And then next week they'll play at UCLA and at USC. It's the 3 toughest teams in the league, all on the road. Even if they just win 1 and it's Arizona or UCLA, they're back in this conversation. If they win 2, they might be all the way back in, even without going perfect. So that's very interesting. Michigan has nothing but tournament teams left on the schedule. That's massive opportunity for them to change things around. And then
and up 5 at Rutgers, unfortunately, as we record this. But go ahead.
Yep. So and then you also look at North Carolina, who will host Virginia, who is basically given everybody a bad taste lately. So that's a massive opportunity for UNC to flip the script. They also finished the year with Duke at home, and they're very good at Dean Smith Center, no matter how bad they are on the road. So really good chance for North Carolina to find their way in. And then you also look at Utah State, who closes the year with a home game against Boise State, where Vegas would probably even have them favored to win that. And I don't know if that's enough to get Utah State in, but it could give everybody a last second final impression that, hey, this team belongs.
Yeah, we didn't really discuss this Utah State profile much. I just pulled it up on the screen here just because it's not much bad. There's a little bit of bad there with the Weber State home loss, although it was a Beehive rivalry game, so it shouldn't really count. But the metrics really like them, and it's going to be an interesting team to take a look at should they get these last 2 wins and maybe win a game or 2 in the Mountain West tournament. But Titel, how about you? Your thoughts?
2 things that occurred to me. I was mentioning to Chad the other day that it's nice to, when so many people on this show have teams who are looking good to make it next month. And then how does Chad repay us? We got a Virginia Xavier matchup. We got the Arizona Rutgers matchup. So he's really trying to knock out as many of us as he can as soon as possible. And then you mentioned the Duke Maryland game earlier. I was at the 2001 Final Four when Duke trailed by 22 to the Terps and came back to win by 11. One of the most, if not the most amazing comebacks I ever seen. Obviously, all I remember that from that night was Arizona beating Michigan State to make the title game. I'm glad to say I was there because it was a little slice of history.
And I'm just noticing, look at the 8-9 line. I think it's almost, we normally see somebody outside the power conferences in those 8-9 games. And as they played out this thing here, we've got power conference teams and blue bloods almost across the line here. It's really strange how it played out this year. But Griggs, you want to finish out the show here?
There's one team in particular that I think is playing way better than what their profile is and what their seed is. I think that their seed and their profile indicate where they belong as far as what they've earned. But as far as the level that they're playing at, Drake is going insane. They were a team that we kind of thought they would be Florida Atlantic, or at least I did back in October coming into the year, that they would be a top 25 team. Had they been playing all year long like they had the last 2 or 3 weeks, they would not need to win the Missouri Valley. We may have already locked them in. And you can't really put them inside the bubble when you look at their profile. But holy crap. I mean, the 4 or the 5 that gets matched up with them, good luck. This team's on a rampage.
Yeah. If we had the RPI as the dominant metric still, Drake would be right on the bubble. At 44. It's just, today's net world and the way they evaluate quads killed them. All their losses are 95 plus.
Yeah.
And they got swept by Missouri State.
Yeah. It took them too long to get there, but they are there now. Now they need the auto bid to get all the way in, but if they win the auto bid, this is a team that could go. This is a team that could get to the second weekend. This is a great defensive team. They have a lot of weapons offensively, and the Missouri Valley isn't. Let's not get carried away. It's not a power conference, but it's not a pushover either, and they are blowing teams out.
Yeah, they are looking really good. Real good game coming up Sunday. They're going to be at Bradley with it in a huge showdown at the top of the valley. But if you want to find out more about these under the radar teams, Griggs, go back to the podcast we recorded last night. The Under the Radar podcast, we talked about them. In addition, if you want to find out more about all the conference tournament games beginning Sunday night and going every single night the rest of the way, we are going to be recording Championship Week video notebooks every single night. Tons of content. We will have a couple more bracket rundown shows as well before the end of the season, so we're not done with bracket rundowns at all at this point. But on that note, I do want to take this chance to thank everybody for joining us. And on behalf of David Griggs, John Titel, John
Going in the
Salika,
bunker.
David Dorman, Rocco Miller from
Not doing it.
Bracketeer.org, live from the San Francisco for the San Francisco Dons. I believe you're at the media center there. You're
Yes.
at the podium.
We got the microphone right here.
The
We're ready-
microphone. Looks like
ready
you're
to
at the
take
press
questions,
conference
Chad.
there.
I'm ready to take
Yeah.
questions.
I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.